Peace, blessings, love, light. Welcome to the Cancer season episode, which is being recorded or has been recorded retroactively, meaning that I recorded the Leo season 1. We skipped over Cancer and the summer solstice, not deliberately, but life circumstances can do that, and then recorded a retroactive Cancer season 1. Cancer, of course, is important for so many reasons. In many cultures, it's referred to as midsummer, the height of the summer, as the summer solstice also takes place there. It's the longest daylight that we receive, especially in northern climates, and the shortest amount of dark that we receive, and that varies depending on where you are. I'm upstate in Ithaca, New York, and I had the opportunity to interview Myztico Campo, otherwise known as Tico, a phenomenal UV body painting visionary shamanic artist who conveys his visions in a really humble way where he channels ancient wisdom cultures, and so it made sense for me to interview him, and it also made sense that I interview him within this concept of retroactive, as we do bend time here, and he does that wonderfully in his engagement with our conveyance of who we are beyond our physical bodies and our spirit selves, and our spirit selves situated in the ancient. He did that with me. I had the experience of meeting him and connecting with him pretty much immediately at an art gallery show, which was kind of like a portal, and he takes us through portals, like worm portals, the portals that Einstein speaks of in spook theory. But this specific portal was the Kava Bar in Ithaca, New York, where you pretty much on a daily get transported into another realm. But this time it was in combination with Tico's artwork, where he set up the UV lights and also was body painting people there. So I had my first experience with him there about a year ago, and then we did a shoot together, a collaboration where he did him and his partner, Damaris, who's also a UV body painting artist, as well as a body worker, a tarot reader, and many other things. They painted me, and I did a yoga sequence to the frequencies that they conveyed in me. And it was a really powerful experience for all of us. And it was shifting and transformative. And so Tico talks and touches on the transformation process for both himself and the people he works with, and each person being very unique. And so this is a really powerful interview. We explore a lot. He knows a lot. So there's often times when I was stumped at some of the things he was saying. And so it was definitely a learning curve for me, including his exploration of outer space, the extraterrestrial, Saturn, etc. So I hope you enjoy this interview in this area of retroactive midsummer. And so hopefully your days get a little longer. At least the light within you grows a little as you listen to this. Peace, blessings. And I'll see you on the other side. Tico.
Asif.
You're
very glowing.
So are you.
Yeah. What happened to you? What dream did you wake up out of?
The one that you created and constructed with your love, Damaris.
Yes.
So, of course, I fell into a portal. And I came out at the Kava Bar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Of course.
And so it's interesting because we're kind of already traveling in space, interstellar, intergalactic dimensions.
Right.
And so when I first walked into the Kava Bar in this portal, and in my first memory of you, of course, the first memory might be thousands of years ago, and we'll get to that.
Yes.
But this most recent manifestation of memory at the Kava Bar in this portal, underground realm of bar, alcohol less, teas and kava, ceremonial. I'm fully transported, and the first painting I come across is ancient wisdom trees.
Oh, yes.
And ancient wisdom trees has these two defenders, it seems, warriors, and there's this tree behind them, and it reminded me of Avatar.
Right. Well, think about it, right? The trees have so much to teach us, right? There's so much wisdom embedded within these trees, and we have such a coexistence with trees. What what we exhale, they breathe in, and what they exhale, we breathe. We breathe in ourselves, right? And so the idea that the ancient tree wisdom is so important for humanity is more striking than ever. And so I like to depict trees in my paintings as sacred beings that we should honor and that we should coexist with and connect with, basically. So one of the new songs of my band Brooklyn Bones is called Tree Spirit, which also brings about that philosophy, and it's basically a tribute to the tree system, because several years ago I had a very deep encounter when I was at a festival in the South called Gratifly. And I had taken some psilocybin, and I roamed around on my own, and they had created this tree altar, and I was there meditating in front of this tree, and this tree started connecting with me telepathically. And it took me on a journey through its root system. It's like I was like traveling through this interconnected root system underground, and it was like it was showing me the kind of like the internet of nature, as well as the mycelium network that also helped connect all the plant life in that forest. And so ever since then, I've had a very I just feel like a very deep love for trees.
How long ago was that?
But this was about 6 years ago now.
And so those paintings were post that experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also when I was in Peru, I connected with the trees of the rainforest of the Amazon, and I did some paintings about that, and also like the medicine men and women working with saving what's being left of the rainforest. There's so much like burning down of the Amazon just for quick profits, and it's really disturbing, to see that happen, because you can never replace ancient forest or rainforest areas. It's really tragic.
Right. And what you do is you immediately situate us in the spirit of the trees. And so I'm walking into this portal in the Kava Bar, which for anyone who hasn't been there is itself a magical space. And it kind of does replicate the experience of going into a portal. So if you have been on mycelium or any other type of psychedelic experience, whether with plant medicine or not, it's experiencing that without that. But then there are your paintings, and they're lit by the black light, and they're coming out. And so you have this series within your paintings that are interstellar. So you have the interstellar toker, and you have the interstellar peace pipe.
Oh, yes.
And what I was thinking, Tico, is that if I were to give an overall title to all of your pieces, it would be Interstellar.
Interstellar, yeah. Well, that's a great way to see it. I really am a humble servant to the source, and I am grateful to be a vessel for this art to flow through me. I've never had any formal art education, and so I basically channel, really is the best word of expression, really, to allow these visions to flow through me, And so, like what you see behind here, it really comes without any pre-planning. I mean, these are beautiful visions from my beloved Damari as well, and what she's been working on. And her paintings, in a lot of ways, are otherworldly in their own right. And so, working within the UV spectrum allows the viewer to to see beyond just the average spectrum of daily visuals, right? So there's many spectrums that the human eye cannot see, and wavelengths that we cannot see. Whereas, like in the animal kingdom or the insect kingdom, their eyes see have a very different perspective than the human eyes, and so the UV spectrum has its own magic as far as that's concerned. And I guess fell in love with painting with UV several years ago.
And how did that happen for you?
I was living in England, and I would go visit Amsterdam once a month, and I stumbled across the Museum of Fluorescent Art in Amsterdam, which is owned by a expat Brooklynite. And I was the only one there that rainy day visiting, and he and his wife gave me a tour, and they had all these like rocks and plant life that glowed under UV light. And so I, after several bowls of hashish with them, I thought to myself, well, I should try painting in UV. So when I started painting in England at festivals, I was the only black light painter. Everybody else was doing regular acrylics. And then people started asking me if I could body paint them with UV. And so for the past 9 years now, I've been body painting at different festivals.
But you were already doing the black light painting?
No,
Okay.
I was inspired by the that they call. It's called the Electric Ladyland Museum in Amsterdam. It's an homage to the Jimi Hendrix Electric Ladyland album. So about 9-10 years ago now, I've been UV painting ever since. And then I started body painting in Europe. And then when I came back to New York, I was booked at all these different venues and stuff to paint, body paint. And that's what my partner and I are doing now.
Yeah, I know you've done hundreds of spaces, galleries, festivals, music festivals. So you've worked with musicians, you've worked with rock stars, you've worked with trappers.
Yeah.
So do you find yourself feeling drawn, especially because, so this is what I want to presence, is something you said that really struck with me, is that the creative process, it not only forgoes, but subverses capitalism and materialism and ego. Like, it allows you to get past that. And so the creative process is intrinsically something of the spirit. And so how does that work when you're being booked for shows and now you're kind of exchanging this deep ancient art for currency?
Well, I think of it as a love exchange, right? And so we typically work by donation at these events, and so it's a really it's an honor to be painting all these beings, because body painting is as ancient as cave painting, right? All sorts of tribes around the world have been painting each other for rituals and transformation and medicinal purposes and initiations. And so to bring it into this context is an honor. I mean, there's not that many UV body painters around the world. I'm connected with a few of them, but there's not that many of us, so it's really interesting to see how people react as they see themselves, glowing and in a different light. So even like adults, like for example, like a few weeks ago, we painted this elderly couple that was like in their 80s, and they were celebrating their anniversary. This older Jewish couple, and they were like kids, when they saw themselves when we completed the painting, and they were like so playful, and it brings out that inner child in a lot of ways, right? And so many of us adults have lost touch with our inner child, and so that inner child in a lot of ways is so important for us to be able to transcend a lot of what's going on across this planet nowadays. And people have become so jaded and so serious about life that that their inner child has been squashed, and I think that kind of starts early on in the indoctrination system of schooling, right, where that child is like oppressed and controlled and manipulated to become obedient servants. So
I feel so connected to what you're saying about schooling. And, I remember, both of us share a New York story, right?
Yeah.
So from kindergarten through high school, it felt like serving out a sentence. It's just like, when is this over? Right?
Yeah.
And so I do think a lot about the unschooling movement, even beyond just homeschools, and think more about the ancient wisdom culture model. And so I was wondering, do you have ideas? Like, you mentioned that you weren't trained in arts, and yet you're one of the most prolific and profound spirit artists that I've ever come across. So have you given much thought to an alternative to the schooling system?
I think it's important to encourage children to do what they love to do, right? Instead of like testing them in these state mandated kind of exams that have no bearing on their adult lives. It's like really short-term memory testing, and it really it kind of like makes the playing field of the education process very out of balance. It's almost like forcing young minds to not think for themselves. It's not nurturing critical thinking. It's not nurturing, let's say, areas of interest that a child would want to pursue. There are children that are interested in math or science or the arts or reading, dance, whatever. And so I believe that each of us are born with some sort of an innate sense of gifts that we could all offer to our communities and the world at large. But when those gifts are manipulated and controlled because of certain testing schemes, then that's an area that schooling should be re-evaluated. So I think it's important for parents, if they're able to homeschool their children, and to encourage their children to do what they love to do, and say, wow, okay, so you're interested in a certain field or topic. Let's encourage that. My parents, when I was a kid, they were always very encouraging about my art and music, and so I'm grateful for them that they were that way.
I know your dad was like a cartoonist, and he was an inspiration for you in terms of how you kind of got started. I'm wondering though if you could share a story like of a particular moment that was a shift for you, like what made the paradigm of this matrix that we're in obvious and clear, and like was there a moment of clarity for you in your journey, either as a kid or adolescent or adult?
Yeah, I mean, I do recall, like, at about the age of 5, my dad used to do these caricatures, and it just really fascinated me with what, when you combine lines together, how it can create images. And so from then on, I mean, my dad would encourage me to get coloring books and start experimenting, really. And so a turning point really was when I was about second grade in Catholic school, and during lunchtime when the kids were out playing tag out in the schoolyard, I would find myself sitting by the blackboard drawing Tyrannosaurus Rexes eating nuns, Yeah, and
did you go to Catholic school?
I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. Yeah. And so the nuns weren't too happy about those depictions, but they thought I was like a weird kid. And so in high school, I went to an all boys Catholic school in Manhattan, and a lot of the kids were unsurprisingly stoners. I grew up in the 70s, and so I would draw like caricatures of the teachers, and then I would pass it around class, and the kids would be cracking up, and the teachers had like no idea that what are they laughing at. And so I got involved in theater and started doing acting and touring with a group called Family Life Theater, sponsored by New York Medical College, and we toured for 4 years around the States and Canada.
Wait, so what's the connection between like the art, like passing around these caricatures, and the theater?
Well, the connection was that I got so bored at Catholic school because it was just like a lot of just bullshit, basically. And it was very hypocritical. And so theater gave me an outlet to get out of daily classes. So I was only in class once a week, and the rest of the week I was on tour with the theater group. And so the theater group expanded my creative process as well. I love the whole theatrical expression, let's say, and it kind of flowed into the painting and music process.
It makes me think of that era of New York City. I know you grew up in Hell's Kitchen, and there was that period of the outburst of inner city New York where the walls of buildings, the walls of subways became the canvas for so many artists from more marginalized areas, right? And yet, in relationship to what you say about art and like, it being a creative process that really overturns materialism and spirit, one of the greatest defeats of the graffiti movement, because Mayor Koch, they had special wings of the police department dedicated to trying to subdue graffiti and graffiti artists, right? They tried everything. Nothing worked, except what worked was that the art world started paying attention to these graffiti artists. And what they did was they took some of the biggest graffiti artists at the time, Lee, Scene, Lady Pink, those three specifically, two of them from the Bronx, one of them from Queens, and offered them an opportunity to show their art and pay them like $500 to $1,000 each for their art, which was nothing in respect to the context of that art world. But after that, they refused to do their art for free, right? So now there was this commodity, and like that kind of changed the graffiti urban guerrilla art movement into a mural paid for movement. So yeah, again, like in terms of art being this creative process that's one of spirit, as Madonna says, we're living in a material world. So how do you reconcile one with the other?
For me personally, and a lot of artists that I know, like within the visionary art circle, it's really about honoring the source of creativity. Whatever materialism comes from that, it's because there are people that appreciate that honesty. If you're not honest about your creative output and whatever that output may be, and if you're doing it just for the sake of materialistic gain or fame or whatever, then basically that's like almost like a little trend. So it's like eye candy, and it doesn't become timeless. It's just like it captures like a moment. But ideally, I mean, I would think that you'd want to be able to create something that's timeless, something that could be viewed 100 years from now, or far in advance. That say, wow, this still resonates with the human spirit. And so, my approach really is to honor the source and not be too conscientious about, will this sell or not? I mean, it's nice when it sells, and it's nice when people appreciate your art, but it isn't my intention when I go into painting. I just do it because it's part of my mission here,
Right.
right? And it's the nurturing of spirit. After all, I mean, what are we here for on this planet? Are we here to play this game of materialism, or are we here to have the experiences that nurture the multifaceted jewel within ourselves, right? You know, we have that multifaceted divinity within each of us that we either we could nurture or we could just be blind to and succumb to the trappings of this world, you know.
And I know that to be a truth because I've experienced being painted by you. And I remember just being fully transported. And I know you've done all these like thousands of shows, bodies, etc. And there are body painters who are in these spaces. And there's even, like, as you mentioned, there aren't a lot, but there are some UV body painters as well. I think for me, the difference was that you immediately situate the subject into a space of ritual, and a space of ritual that is transformative and immediately creates a journey for them. So what's your process? Like, how does that work for you? And like, are you also being transported in the process of working on people?
Most certainly, yeah. Yeah, the process is really a meditation, a connection with the spiritual field, or the Nagual, which is the energy field of each being.
You said Nagual?
Nagual, yeah. So Nagual is a term that Carlos Castaneda's talked about in the teachings of Don Juan, where the shamanic practice, where the Nagual is like an X shape that reaches out about 6 feet outward, and it's the energy field. And so the working with the UV patterns, it kind of brings out the different energy aspects of each person. So there's no two persons are alike when they're being painted. And so I don't use like any stencils. It's all freehand. There's no airbrushes. It's all hand brushes. And so I am transported, and it's really interesting because a lot of times I don't necessarily plan out what I see in a person. I just feel their energy, and so their energy kind of dictates the way that the brush moves, right? So it's almost like a subliminal or stream of consciousness type of painting that allows that flow to happen. And so at the end of that journey, it's like, wow, it's like I didn't expect that, yeah. And that's where the magic comes in, you know, for me, and I'm really honored to be able to participate in this.
I'm wondering if you could maybe like relate a story with someone you painted where it was like, it was a lot, like things came up for you where you were like deeply impacted. And, you know, I know that probably happens with almost everyone, but like something that really stuck out, or someone who really stuck out for you.
Yeah, there was this one woman I painted a few years ago in Brooklyn. She was a bit overweight. She was very body conscious. And while I was painting her, she told me that she had cancer. And I was kind of praying with each brush stroke for her well-being. And I remember that at the end, when she saw herself in the mirror, she started crying, and she said that I've never thought of myself as beautiful, or as I never really accepted myself or loved myself. And then now, when she saw herself painted up this way, she saw herself in a completely different spectrum. And then a few weeks later, I get an email from her, and she said that, you know, that the painting that she experienced with me changed her whole viewpoint about herself, and her cancer went away, and the doctors were surprised that, you know, that this has happened. And so, like, we tap into the idea of epigenetics that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, and the power of the mind to heal the body and spirit. And when you're able to see yourself in a completely different light, you're able to truly heal within. A lot of the sickness that people experience, and what the society is experiencing, is a lot of mostly like self-imposed trauma, or perhaps.
What do you mean by self-imposed trauma?
Self-doubt, having not liking the way you look, wanting to change who you are. There's a lot of confusion. I think ever more so in a society, with people like changing their gender or their pronouns, or confused about who they are in general, and that's it's because there's a lot of confusion, a lot of static that's perpetrated upon human minds, and that causes a lot of trauma for people, whether it be also trauma imposed by society or childhood experiences that causes illness, and so that's something that we have to come together and uplift each other, because humanity is suffering from major collective trauma.
Do you see yourself as some of the shamans in your painting?
I wouldn't call myself a shaman by any means, but I hope to be able to uplift people through art, and be able to help them see themselves in a different way. Or, I also do live canvas painting at festivals, and I've had people break down and cry and really connect with the images, and they're really moved by it, and that's the power. That's the power of art, in a lot of ways, where it could really resonate with different beings in a way that's very healing. So think of it as art therapy, and that's what I love about the UV spectrum, is because the colors are so vibrant, and colors could be so healing in a lot of ways. And like when you have like the what is it, like the holy days, where the Indian ceremonies where
Kumbh Mela, where you
yeah.
had the congregation of yogis come together, right?
Yeah, so that all that color is so vibrant, and color is so healing.
Right, and there's also the Holy Festival, the Festival of Colors,
Festival of Color,
which comes around spring and is an honoring of that area of the region of time that we're in. And I did feel that, and I did get that experience when you and Damaris kind of reconceptualized me in your painting,
right?
And it did feel like I was, as medicine man in the yogic tradition, like also being transported by a medicine man in this ancient way. And I don't know if you remember that, I do. And so what came up for you? Because as you were painting me, and then we did the yoga sequence afterwards, which was really deep and powerful. I started feeling transported into like a past life where I was just like, this ancient, like hundreds of year old yogi, and I was experiencing the movements in my body in a whole different way. So I'm just wondering, like, when you were painting me, what was coming up for you?
I was time traveling, really. I was like feeling like tapping into your ancestry and going back deep into your DNA postures, basically, and trying to manifest that in this realm. So that was a very beautiful session, and then to see you bring it to life, and that was very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I felt transported, and I know that so much of what you do is in this area of sacred, and like. Going back to the image that sticks with me the most, the painting that like resonated the most with me in that exhibit at the Kava Bar, and I love this like interstellarness. Like, I think there's this play of time. Like even this recording is like in the future for a past episode, right?
Right.
But it was the painting that was titled Aquarian Shamanist and the Ancient Tree Spirit.
Yes.
And what resonated about that was it's kind of like similar to human beings. There's something beautiful and amazing about all life, all beings, all human beings. Mm-hmm. But there's some human beings that have a deeper resonance with you for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm curious if you have thoughts on why. Mm-hmm. But this painting had a really deep shifting reverence for me. And I sat with it and I kept coming back to it. And so there's this shamaness who's kneeling before a tree.
Right.
And it appears like she's blowing breath into this tree. Mm-hmm. And they both kind of have this like gaze at each other, like they're almost stargazing, but at each other. And then there's this nexus of different ancient wisdom cultures. Like there's a sphinx there, right? So you're presencing ancient Egypt. And then there's Yogananda. So you're presencing ancient India. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a little bit about that painting and this intersectionality?
Yeah, that was a collaboration I did with my friend Cassie, where I painted the shamanist, and she was painting the tree. And then when it started coming together, the shamanist was singing these healing songs. They're called Ikaros, which is a traditional healing songs used from the Amazonian Shipibo people during medicine rituals of ayahuasca. And so the shamanist would be was there kind of meditating with this tree. And Yogananda appeared during this meditation. Yogananda was, when I read the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, it really struck me on so many different levels. And I just feel his spiritual presence in some of my works as well. And so the idea of combining ancient practices and philosophies and spiritual energies, they coalesce into that piece, because there's a hummingbird that is like sipping the nectar of love. She's holding like this staff that has like a heart shape, and the idea that love will always overcome whatever negativity we may encounter throughout our life, and so the tree acts as a portal for that cleansing, a metamorphosis of consciousness, and that love is part of that metamorphosis, right? It's almost like the foundation of the metamorphosis, and we're each capable of uplifting not only our spirit, but those that we encounter. Each person that we encounter is a teacher that we could learn from, right? And so the idea is, let's learn from each other, let's grow from each other, let's uplift each other. This shouldn't be a state of competition. This should be a state of spiritually embellishing the gifts that we each have, right? That we can offer each other. And so that painting, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of giving, a lot of gifts that are being rising within that piece. And so that's what I got from that piece.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's beautiful. I definitely encourage people to take a look, buy the print. I know you have prints available for that.
We'll show it in the video.
That would be awesome. Yeah, let's do that. The thing that it's bringing up for me, Tico, is what you've said about your distrust. Like there's this lover, and the lover paints, and you're building this medicine and all that. And then you also have this distrust, and you mentioned the distrust in terms of the distrust of government, the distrust of corporations. By the way, I love the term you use, the distrust of banksters. But you also mentioned distrust of religion, right? Organized religion. And I guess what it made me think of is going back to that piece that you have with the wisdom tree keepers, right? You have these two warriors who are before a tree, right? And so it made me think of Avatar, and it made me think of how any community that comes together, and I personally believe communities are essential, and especially in this realm of individualism, and I'd love to hear your opinion about that. But when you have people coming together, any grouping, you start having, especially if it's from an ancient wisdom tradition, you have like some type of allegiance to spiritual rituals, right? And then over time, those spiritual rituals have a governance. And so you might have a body, whether it's a body of elders, or maybe whether it's matriarchal or patriarchal, you have some facilitation of those rules and around the ritual. And then you might have a warrior class within that community who might defend that tribe or people, etc., right? So I guess I wonder, how do you reconcile that at the very heart of a lot of these ancient wisdom cultures are some type of religiosity, some type of governance of that religiosity, and some type of, for lack of a better term, militarism, or like a warrior class that might defend with your, with this distrust that you have? How would you reconcile one with the other?
So when we think back about the origins of our species, it seems like that for thousands of years there's been those elements in human nature, and those institutions of governance and control. It's almost as if our DNA has been limited. Although there's a lot of human DNA, what the scientists call as junk DNA, has not been turned on because from...
You said junk DNA.
How scientists label human DNA. A big portion of human DNA is what they call junk DNA. But I don't see that as junk. I just see it that DNA is not, that switch has not been turned on. So that's like having a computer system where you're only able to reach certain parts of the computer, but there's all this hidden knowledge that's in there already. That hasn't been switched on, and it's probably for the reason that humanity is not ready to join the cosmic family. It's almost as if we're being kept an eye on to see how we safeguard this planet, what kind of stewards we are for this planet, and how we care for each other. But there's been this centuries-old battle, I guess, and it's throughout the cosmos, most likely, of the dark and light, right? Good versus evil elements. And so this trust really, even more so in the present, is because they're in the bigger picture. In the bigger picture, it seems like as if though they, when I say they, there's certain elements within humanity that doesn't seem to be of humans at all. It seems to be some sort of archonic nature that, like let's say in the Mahabharata or other ancient texts, where they talk about these beings that are partially reptilian or have some sort of dark nature of controlling the human species and feeding off the violent nature of the human psyche. And there seems to be like a hidden lost knowledge that's been kept from humanity about our true origin, and so therefore the distrust really stems from an early age for me, and it's really from the Catholic school upbringing as to how we were taught that as children that we were sinners at a young age, and that this man on the cross died for our sins, and that that we're all going to hell if we don't live up to what they feel honors their religion. And so when you talk about organized religion, when you talk about the banking industry, the military-industrial complex, politics, for me, this seems like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And so together, they oppress what's possible for humanity in a lot of ways. And nowadays in the present, it seems like more people are realizing this, and the levels of distrust is so high. So who can we ultimately trust? I have this conversation with a lot of acquaintances and friends, and ultimately it comes down to who can we trust but our own intuition. And sometimes our own intuition could be also stuck with static. And that static, you would have to question, are these really my thoughts? Where are these thoughts coming from? What is consciousness? What are we manipulated by some sort of outside force that messes with our truth, or are we masters of our mind? Right? There are people that are controlled by these thoughts that come from the ether. And that's a whole other rabbit hole that you could go down, because who is it or what is it that's projecting these thoughts that make people do things that are brutal and that are violent, that are oppressive, that just lacks compassion. So that distrust is something that we each have to ask ourselves, like, who can we trust? Ultimately.
Mm-hmm. You know what that was bringing up for me, Tico, is that my first response to that was it felt like a bit of an us and them, right? And I think that can be very common in relationship to how much we feel alienated by this culture of uber individualism, and like you said there. But then the thing that I think differentiates what you were saying was this ethereal component. Like, where are these thoughts coming from?
Right.
And I think that problematizes the us and them. It's not as black and white or clear cut. So what is the them then that's impacting the us?
Yeah, that's a deep question, man, because I know I'll tap into this area a little briefly, but there's been research about this kind of control energy that's coming from Saturn. I don't know if you've heard about what's been going up in Saturn, but various authors and researchers and NASA whistleblowers have been showing from the Hubble Space Telescope that the rings of Saturn are being created by these huge 3-4 mile long crafts that are injecting crystals into the rings of Saturn.
When you say crafts, you mean spacecraft?
Some sort of machinery
or
craft. And you can look this up. Brian Scott from the Reality Revolution recently had an episode on his podcast about the secrets of Saturn. And David Icke talked about this and other researchers and other NASA people related with NASA. But anyway, I believe it's the south pole of Saturn. There's a huge storm that's in a hexagonal shape that's not seen anywhere in nature. It seems very artificially made. Now, in prehistory, according to some of the archaeologists, in prehistory, there was no accounts of any sort of rings around Saturn by certain tribes, and that our moon appeared at some later point while humans were still were evolving, and that the moon was dragged into our orbit as an artificial satellite to be able to transmit the energy from Saturn, and that Saturn is being used as a way of manipulating human consciousness. I know this sounds like a crazy sci-fi film, but when you think about, like, where do our thoughts come from, and are we truly our thoughts? And especially when it's like thoughts with bad intentions, it could be that humans are being tested and are being manipulated in some ways to see how we react to these energy fields or these transmissions. So I would suggest your listeners and your viewers to tap into the Reality Revolution Secrets of Saturn episode. It goes pretty deep, and it shows the imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope of these crafts creating these crystals, and crystals are transmitters of sound. So when you there was a recording of the Voyager ship that recorded the sounds of Saturn, and it's very eerie sounding. I don't know if you've heard it, but
I haven't. But
yeah.
I mean, implicit in what you're saying is the acknowledgement, and more than just an acknowledgement, but the acceptance of life beyond what we know as terrestrial life, and not just terrestrial life, but intelligent life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. I mean, they've been observing us since the beginning of our species, and when you go back to ancient Sumerian cuneiform and depictions of the Anunnaki that were the genetic engineers of our human species, and how they merged the DNA of primates with their DNA to create workers, basically. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Zacharias Sitchin.
I'm not.
He wrote a book called The 12th Planet, and so according to ancient Sumerian texts and art, they show these beings with the Anunnaki is translated those that came from the sky, and that were the genetic engineers of the human species. So the idea that there's a missing link, that all of a sudden humans appeared, and that these huge monolithic temples and structures just started appearing when during the time of the supposed hunter-gatherers, like Göbekli Tepe and all these amazing structures in Egypt and Africa and South America. These huge monolithic structures that cannot be replicated by today's construction standards. Who was behind these structures? Who taught humanity mathematics and astronomy and farming and language and so forth?
Well, I mean, what you're posing is questions that debunk the pathologization of that line of thinking. Like, I think oftentimes when you hear people questioning some of the history that we're presented with, it's either dismissed or it's kind of pathologized, or it's seen as conspiracy. I can't say I know, but I think one of the things you're doing is you're raising questions that do require us to really explore and research. And it does bring up how did these pyramids get here, and how and why did they appear in these very disparate parts of the earth? Like, you have pyramids in Tikal in Guatemala, you have these pyramids in Egypt, Sudan, in that area of North Africa, and then you also have structures like Stonehenge, Easter Island.
Then you have these incredible structures in India. I forget the name of the temple right now, but there's a temple that was dug out of completely out of a mountain, and it's dug out of the rock, and it's all these precise carvings that was all carved out of one piece of mountain. How were they able to dig deep into that mountain and create this beautiful temple out of one piece of rock is beyond, beyond what we know.
Yeah, I've actually been there.
You know which temple I'm talking about?
Yeah, the entire temple and all the sculptures are from this one piece of rock. Yeah.
You were there? Wow.
I was there. It was,
it's
a powerful experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's other, there's other temples like in Ethiopia that were built out of from mountainsides, and the Nazca lines in Peru, where it seems like mountaintops were sheared off, just flattened out. Man, it's like what type of technology was used then to create these amazing structures. So the author Graham Hancock, who wrote The Fingerprints of the Gods, states that humanity is suffering from collective amnesia, and so there's a lot of information that's being hidden from us, and it's done on purpose to keep us in a state of obedience and consumerist society.
Well, so I think what I'm wondering, and maybe a little bit confused about, is when you're saying us, you're referring to humans. So I guess that's what I'm assuming is humans. So then, are we in bondage to an elite in terms of a corporate class, or are we in bondage to something that's alien to the terrestrial world?
There is a collusion between extraterrestrial force and the material corporate force. So the idea that governments have been working, certain shadowy elements of governments have been working with off-world beings to manifest these crafts of destruction in exchange for them experimenting on humans or other life forms, has been discussed since as far as the U.S. is concerned, the Eisenhower administration. And he warned Americans about being aware of the military-industrial complex. Right. But also, once again, going back to ancient Vedic text in the Mahabharata, where they talk about nuclear wars thousands of years ago, where there was these flying crafts appearing out of the sky, and that wars were taking place in the sky. There's villages in India where the grounds have been like so bonded together, it's like almost as if it's been struck by some sort of nuclear weapon, and everything's become like glass. I forget the name of that.
But Tika, where are they now? Like if that's true, if everything that you're saying is true, I don't know. I think I'm kind of at that space in life where I have no clue how any of this works.
I know, it's crazy,
right? But I mean, I feel like you're definitely very well researched, and more than just research, it's coming from a space of being tuned in. And I know that about you because of what I've experienced from you. So where are they now? If there was this population that were, involved in these nuclear wars, etc.
Well, there are deep underground cities all over the world. And there's been whistleblowers that have come out, such as Phil Schneider, who was a geologist for the U.S. military and for the government. He and his father were the head of geologists that would create these massive tunnels deep under the earth. And Phil Schneider came out to reveal that that there was one episode where they dug this tunnel in one area. I believe it was up by New Mexico area, and they opened up a cavern where these huge grays appeared, and there was a battle ensued between them and these Navy SEALs, and most of the Navy SEALs got killed, and he was one of the survivors, and his fingers were blown off by some sort of laser from these grays, and he showed scars from this battle, and he went on his lecture circuit to reveal this to the world, and about a year after a year after going into this lecture, he was mysteriously suicided by elements of the shadow government, as well as William Cooper. William Cooper wrote the book "Behold the Pale Horse,"
Right.
and I read that book when I was like in my teens, and it just really opened up my eyes about government involvements with off-world beings. There's supposedly about 57 different off-world lineages that these governments are working with. And so some of them are benevolent, some of them are very troublesome, let's say. So I don't know. I think we're here to shine as brightly as we can, with our time here.
And when you say we, are you making a distinction then, like between us that are human and us that are derived from this? Are you saying that that corporate class is derived from this alien race, or are you saying that they're in collusion with it?
There's some sort of collusion going on,
but they're not part alien. That's not what you're saying.
No, I mean, think about like the different monarchies throughout the ages, and the idea that the blue bloods, right? So there's like they would intermarry, and they wanted to keep it within their family, and so there was some sort of lineage aspect to. I notice. I know it sounds crazy, but when the reptilian nature, where you see these reptilian beings depicted in ancient Egyptian art, African art, art from all over the world, where it's these snake beings, these dragon beings that are depicted, and so are these like myths, or are these like products of the imagination of humanity that's been going on, or there must be some sort of truth to it, because you see it depicted in all sorts of different ancient cultures.
So, but what do they want? So there is a collusion, and the collusion is with this elite population.
Right.
What do those who are colluding with this elite population want?
I know that's a question that I've been trying to understand. It could be that at the age that we're at in the present time, the idea of forcing the human species to receive this experimental injection, the idea of uniting the human species with artificial intelligence, right? That these injections contain nanoparticles that in a lot of ways removes the soul of humanity. Rudolf Steiner talked about this back in 1910, where he prophesied that there will come a time where these vaccines will remove the soul from humanity.
He refers specifically to vaccines.
Yeah. You got to see. I'll show you the quote, man.
Okay.
It's pretty crazy stuff. But these vaccines or these injections are there to remove the empathy and compassion from human beings, and so there's some sort of agenda there to merge humanity with artificial intelligence, and we're at a very slippery slope right now. And Terence McKenna, I don't know if you're familiar with Terence McKenna. Yeah. So Terence McKenna would have these discussions about the merging of AI with humanity, and the idea that they want to digitize the human species, and maybe that's the fate of where humans are meant to go.
And it's not far-fetched at all. Like if you look at what's happened since COVID and schools shutting down,
right,
and the amount of screen time that young people, like that generation who's in school right now, have had to spend, and the learning curve that was involved for those who educate our young people in being fully acclimated to like being on the screen constantly. So, like even like beyond just conjecturing, like that's happening.
Right. Yeah, and it's we've been driven to this point now, and the whole control grid is there to be able to control through the frequencies of fear, and ultimately, like these questions came up during a lecture that Terence McKenna had called "Culture is Not Your Friend," where we have to be able to lift the veil of deception and distractions that society imposes upon us, especially at young ages, to be able to say, okay, is this a culture or society that we want to put our trust in? Or are we here to truly realize our potential as human beings, and that's something that the archonic elements in governments or organized religion, etc.
I'm sorry, you said archonic?
Yeah.
What is that?
Archons are what's also known as jinns. They're mischievous spirits that
fire life.
Yeah, that are able to manipulate people when they're depressed or they're in a drug-induced state where they possess people through. There's different portals that these beings could come into to control and cause acts of violence or other means of suppression, let's say. But yet in that talk, Culture is Not Your Friend, he discusses the idea that how can we break free from this control grid, right? And he answered by creating art, by expressing our humanity, because that's something that they cannot control. They cannot control love, the frequencies of love. So they work within the frequencies of fear, right? They don't have creativity. They lack creativity. They lack empathy, and that's what they're trying to suppress. Okay, through all this manipulation. So we have to be very aware and conscientious of how much power we give to these entities, or at least ask ourselves, to whom do we consent to give our power to? Do we allow these paper pushers or whatever these entities are to manipulate our lives through fear and lies and deception, or are we here for a higher purpose to be able to truly blossom? Because we have so much beauty that we could really bring forth within our communities and within each other. And so the whole thing of social distancing, which is an oxymoron, how could you be social when you're distancing? So the idea of keeping people 6 feet apart, right? So 6 feet apart is an interesting number, because the human heart, the energy field goes out to 6 feet. So that they don't want people to connect in a way that they could bring large groups of people together. I mean, look at what's going on in Europe and the mass protests that thousands of people, millions of people coming together and are saying no. They fear that, but they're waking up a sleeping giant. Is what's happening, because we're at a very interesting time of history.
What are these protests?
Well, the protests against lockdowns, against these mandates and vaccine passports, that's all like it's so full of deception, and the censoring of all these doctors that want to speak out and are putting their livelihoods on the line. These doctors wouldn't be putting their licenses and everything that they work for on the line if this was all true. They're trying to alarm people. They're trying to wake up people. So it's interesting times, and
well, so would you say it's within the realm of possibility that because of our negative impact on the planet, because of our negative relationship to other beings, other species, that it's possible that there's could be something like a zootonic skipping of a virus, with things like cattle farming and the way we torture, abuse, inject animals.
Right.
Is it outside of the scope of possibility that there might be a virus that might transfer from animals to humans?
Well, yeah, but think about it. I mean, viruses have been here since the beginning of humankind, right?
Okay.
We humans are a virus within themselves. I mean, we have so much bacteria happening within ourselves. But there's more and more evidence that's coming out that this was a man-made experiment that they've been doing these experiments for decades, man. I mean, like Lyme disease, AIDS, Zika.
But this one seems a little distinct. Like it seems like there's a major shift in terms of how there's an approach. Like this one is like, hey, let's shut everything down, right? So then I guess why would, if it is more of this like social distancing, this control, etc., doesn't it impact the economy overall if everything is shut down? If people are like, forced to like stay home or social distance, and then their businesses get shut down, isn't that bad for business though?
They don't care about that. They want a collapse, an economic collapse. They want that because they want to usher in a one world economy, a digital economy where everything could be tracked. All of your personal affairs could be tracked. That's the great reset, which is if you look deeper into Klaus Schwab's history and his family of the World Economic Forum, they were tied in with the Third Reich.
Who is he?
Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, who's pushing this agenda along with the WHO and the IMF and the Communist Party of China. They want to create a communistic control grid, which is once again the digital evolution of humanity, and they're doing it for very sinister purposes. When you think about like who was involved in the funding of the Third Reich, it's the same people that are in power today. All right, it's IBM and the banking system, the NASA. They're all tied in to the Nazis' philosophy. Klaus Schwab's family was involved with Third Reich, the British monarchy. There's a lot of history there that people are not aware of, But let's go to the real root of this. By honoring the indigenous people of the world, the wisdom keepers, the true wisdom keepers of this planet, and what their message is that humanity has become so torn apart away from nature, which in essence is great spirit. They've driven us so far apart from the beauty and the honoring of nature and sacred water and the soil and the air. This is what their agenda is, because they want to depopulate the planet. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the Georgia Guidestones.
I'm not.
So the Georgia Guidestones is like America's Stonehenge, and it was erected over like 30 years ago in the outskirts of Atlanta. It was put up by some anonymous person going by the name of R.C. Christian, and a lot of people believe that it was most likely funded by Ted Turner, the founder of CNN. But the Georgia Guidestones has 10 commandments. And at the huge granite slabs with a time capsule with no opening date at the bottom of it. And the first commandment states that the world can only sustain 500 million people, and that the rest of the population has to be removed, basically. And that's their agenda. That's what Agenda 2030 is, the population of the planet. And this is like, Bill Gates' family was they're eugenicists. Elon Musk's family were eugenicists. The founder of Planned Parenthood were eugenicists. And so their idea that the earth can only sustain a certain amount of people, and then them pushing this agenda at this time is an interesting crossroads.
Right. And also what I'm hearing from you is that the doom and gloom doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be something that you get consumed by if you focus on your purpose here. And your purpose is one of love. Your purpose is to engage in the spiritual process. And a lot of that can happen by way of tapping into some of these ancient wisdom cultures. So how does that work for you in terms of, like, so much of this show for me has been about situating ourselves in the seasons. Like, one way to connect with our time here on planet Earth is to also be honoring where we are in space-time. So this show, which is like 1 month subsequent to the time when it's that concerns us, which is Cancer season. For you, how do seasons, how do the elements, how do particular junctures in the year, and specifically during Cancer season, impact you, impact your art, impact the way you engage with your days?
Well, the seasons are a way of surrendering to where we are along the great rifts in this galaxy. If you go with that flow, the seasons are a way of like being conscientious of the nurturing of spirit and being able to honor the greater possibilities that we have as individuals, and how we honor each other. That in some ways informs the creative output, to be able to honor it in the purest sense possible, to honor the source, like just the simple daily practice of gratitude and honoring what it is that we're grateful for in our lives is part of those seasonal changes, if you will. I mean, if you going into the astrological realm, I mean, personally, I feel like every day is an adventure in a lot of ways. And as far as the astrological realm, it's almost like as if those seasons, those shifts, inform us as to, okay, what is it that we trust? How do we nurture our spirit? How do we become a better person for ourselves and for others? And how do we continue this evolutionary path without succumbing to the negativity that's happening across this planet? So when I say planet, I like to spell it PLAN and then IT. So this has been planned, and this is like a. I mean, I want to be optimistic, and I tend to be optimistic, but and there's been like ideas that this is like a prison planet, and that the connection with Saturn, once you dig deeper into the imagery and the symbolism of Saturn, especially in a modern context, how are we able to break free from those controlling frequencies is work that we each must do. Because if we leave it up to society to guide us, we're in for a very bumpy ride. And the Hopi natives, the elders warned us about these times, and these times have been prophesied by all sorts of indigenous cultures throughout history. And so,
what was the warning about, and what specifically about these times?
Well, the warning from the Hopi prophecy is that we're coming we're at a precipice, basically, and there will be those that will live in the frequencies of fear, and will succumb to that, and then those that will continue within the frequencies of love. And so those within the frequencies of fear will not be able to survive the coming transition, because they will succumb to the control grid, whereas those that work within the frequencies of love are able to elevate their consciousness and be able to transcend a lot of what is coming forward for humanity. Now, that's a choice, right? That's a choice that we each must make ultimately.
And we are certainly seeing heightened levels of divisiveness in an unprecedented way.
Exactly. Yeah, and so people who are acquaintances of friends that I thought were very progressive and critical thinkers have fallen into the frequencies of fear, and I try to have conversations with them to present alternate viewpoints, and they become bullies. And they call us selfish, and that what you're talking about. But when like the term conspiracy theorists is used in a mocking way,
Sure.
because it was devised by the CIA as a way of like mocking people that are critical thinkers. And I tend to be more of a conspiracy analyst myself, and I've been like that since my teens. I've been questioning so much stuff since I was a kid, man. And there's millions of people that have been questioning all of this, and so
I mean, your questioning has also led to like a lot of exploration. Like clearly you're well researched. Like you've definitely had me asking like, wait, who's that throughout this interview. You also have this emphasis on love, and like engaging with that, because that will ultimately trump fear.
Right.
And so if love is also, as you mentioned, you use the term source energy, tapping into source energy.
Right.
And in my understanding of source energy, it's all one. And that's true with all spiritual paths, is that ultimately it gets to the oneness. So then wouldn't that entity in Saturn also be part of that source energy?
Well, think about it. Throughout the cosmos, there is always going to be the dance between the dark and the light. I know my intuition tells me that love will always overcome the darkness, but there has to be that interplay throughout the cosmos. And it's a way of challenging each of the beings, not only here on Earth, but throughout the cosmos. There may be different timelines that, there's multiple Asifs that are experiencing different realms. So there's like the multiverse that different doppelgangers that we each have in different star systems, etc. So it's almost as if we're being tested. Like what side do you want to dance on? Do you want to be connected to Source in a loving, pure way, or are you apt to be part of the self-destructive nature? So we see that obviously, like within the human species, whereas in the animal kingdom and the sea world and the insect kingdom, there's a lot more, let's say, cooperation, coexistence. And so where humans have been could be seen as a parasite on this planet, or we could have a heaven here on Earth if we collectively decide, hey, let's put instead of endless wars against each other in the environment, let's bring our brightest minds together and collectively create a heaven here on Earth. We could do it. We have the resources, we have the money, we have the technology now that we could really uplift each other. There's no reason why anybody should be homeless. There's no reason why anybody should go to bed starving. Think about this, right? So let's go back to this current Twilight Zone COVID, right? If this was true, right, homeless people would be dropping like flies in the street. They're living in the most unsanitary conditions. There would be like, thousands of people on the street dying, right? If this was the case, there's no like disposable bins where it contains medical garbage in public. I see masks all over the street. There's there's been all sorts of different research and findings that these masks contain graphene and other toxins. These nose swabs are breaking a brain blood barrier, and they're injecting things up our nose to be able to infect humans with this. So, and mysteriously the flu has disappeared. I don't know. So it's really interesting how humans could be so easily manipulated, or a majority of humans, and through the frequencies of fear, and once again the media. Who controls the media? The media is like there's only two companies on this planet that pretty much own everything on this planet: BlackRock and Vanguard. When you look at who owns all these corporations, it comes down to two of these companies. Including.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is also like it's there's this African proverb that's something to the effect of until the lion is given an opportunity to speak, the tale of the hunt will always be told by the hunter.
There you go. True. Yeah.
So how do you move forward with that? So like now, like just in terms of us kind of like winding down and so on,
Sure.
How do you move forward from this place of love? Like what's next for Myztico Campo in the space of like these relationships kind of crumbling, some of your relationships, your art kind of taking on this new spin of, what's happening in the world. What's next for you?
Well, we're focusing on expanding our art offerings. Demarise and I, my beloved, thank you for filming. You're awesome. And to be able to find the others, connect with others that are like-minded, that want to do good in this planet, that don't want to accept the fear that's being perpetrated upon us, to be able to shine brightly with the essence of love and spirit, and to be able to bring this forth, this art forth to others that want to experience it. Because art and music bring community together, and being able to coexist with each other is so much more important now than ever. So, as the year progresses, I just want to remain vigilant and be able to have these conversations. I don't want to. We all have our filters of how we perceive what's going on. It doesn't mean that I have to hate you for your beliefs. I want to honor your divinity and whoever else I come across, and whether we agree or disagree, I still honor you as a fractal of infinite consciousness, because we're all here at this. We were born for these times to reflect these times and to be able to think for ourselves. And so I don't want to have further division of humanity. I want to see us come together and truly honor that divine spark within each of us, without being afraid of I have paranoia about this person or that person. I just want to be able to be part of exposing the bad actors, basically, and giving those bad actors maybe some sort of healing, because there's a lot of bad actors that need serious healing for whatever traumas they may have in their lives, if they're acting as human agents or if they're being manipulated by some archonic energy. These bad actors, whether they be politicians or corporate entities, whatever, they have their trauma, and they need to be able to be healed in whatever way we can. And maybe psychedelics is the way forward. Perhaps the idea that mushrooms could be the next superheroes of our evolution, as they've played such a big part in the evolution of our spirit, can be utilized to create a sense of awe and oneness with each other.
I know Paul Stamets did this, or was part of a study, or at least he quoted a study where they looked at people who were experiencing recidivism in prison, and specifically violent offenders, and they found that the use of mushrooms brought down that level of violence by, I'm not sure what the percentage was, but it was significant.
Sure. Well, we watched a documentary the other night called Fantastic Fungi on Netflix, and you got to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul Stamets is one of the big people in it. So, we have to listen to the plants. The guru is within each of us. Let's dissolve and disintegrate whatever negative energy is around us that wants to manipulate our consciousness. they can never control our consciousness unless if we submit. They can never control spirit unless if we allow them to inject us with experimental matter that dissolves empathy. So it's within our power to make that choice.
Thank you so much, Tico. I know that you speak from a place of love. It's felt. I know anyone who's experienced your artwork has felt it.
Thank you.
I know I have, and it's a great honor for us to be having this exploration and conversation. I feel like we could be here for like days. We could be here for years, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's so much depth to what you're saying. So I'd love to, at some point over the course of the show in this cosmic medicine journey, come back to you and continue this conversation.
Sure. It'd be great to have a feminine perspective, to invite divine feminine energy to have these conversations, because these long form conversations are so important. For us to be able to tap into, rather than just sound bites that a lot of the lamestream presents to us. So that's why I love podcasts, and thank you for doing this. And the long form conversations are great. It's great to have an open discussion where we could see eye to eye, and once again, we don't have to agree on everything. But it's good to have these conversations,
Yeah.
Nurture thought, man. Nurture thought.
Yeah. Love.
Blessings.
Love you.
Love you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aho.
Aho. Namaste.
Aho.